Welcome back to Mark Holb's vlog, everyone. Thanks for joining in on this beautiful day. Well, it's quite fresh, it's quite frosty, but hey, there's no wind, it's not snowing, that's a good sign. And because of that, I can't help but talk about the F Type. It's back, and I promised you guys this week, even last week, there's some questions again have been asked. When's the F Type coming back? Well, it's been on and off, it's been sporadic. Because the weather's been so extreme this year, the drives in the F Type have been a little bit less than I would have liked them to be, just because we've had lots of rains and then the associated freeze and rain and freeze. The roads have been really nasty this year, and plus with 35 below for a good month, it's been sort of hit and miss. But hey, we're gonna take the F Type out today, and I really wanna talk about some of the things personally, that if I was the designer at Jaguar, what would I do differently about the F Type? Because I know you guys are all enthusiasts, and you know, some of you guys buy the Jag because of the name, because of its luxurious appointments, but some of you buy the F Type because of its sportiness and its unique appeal, that often you weren't even Jag people, but you came to the brand because of the F Type. Well, guess what? I know that for me personally, I love this car, and I really can't get over how great it is, but there are a few things that personally, if I was the designer or one of the head decision makers at Jaguar, I personally would have made those differences. I would have made some changes to the F Type. It's almost perfection, but there's still a few things that I think we should need to know about. Well, we'll talk about that, but before that, I want to mention too, later we're going to start doing some more car shopping. We're going to go look at a local dealership here, Sherwood Motor Cars. I know they've got a lot of selection of some great cars. We're going to continue our search for our next new toy. But before we get to that, obviously we're missing something here. What are we looking at here? Here we have the Benz, great car. We've got the tint fixed, you know, we talked about that a couple weeks back. And we've got one of my kids' cars over there, the Honda Civic, which is absolutely a tried and true workhorse. But what's missing? Well, if you guys have been watching the videos, you know that the BMW X5 is missing. And we talked about that last week. We drove it into the dealership, and we said, depending on what the decision making is going to happen there, or what the prognosis is for repairs, we'll decide what we're going to do with the X5. So you're probably all wondering, where's the X5? Do we still own the X5? Well, in short, yes, we still own the X5 for now. And so we had a good talk with the dealer. Now, I have to say, the dealer was very good to deal with. In this case, they were great. Service writer was amazing. I even talked to the service tech who did all the diagnostics and troubleshooting. I can't name them, but honestly, great people, easy to work with. I even ended up talking to the service manager, which kind of led me to another direction. And another great person. Honestly, the staff over there at that dealership were great to deal with this go around. Definitely nothing to talk about there. The unfortunate part was, through much diagnostics, they could not replicate the reason why the vehicle kept stalling or wouldn't start. The only thought was, because there was no rough running or idling issues, the thought was maybe it was bad fuel, or maybe it was gelling because it was quite cold that week. So even though I reset the code, we could not replicate it. We put a bunch of miles on, the dealer tried many cold starts, went for some drives, couldn't replicate. But we still have the other code, which had to do with the DEF tank. Now that's where things get ugly. And personally, I think BMW is kind of holding people by the short and curlies in the fact that, honestly, you have to buy the whole tank. Yes, there's a temperature sensor built within that tank that's the culprit in this case. And that's been validated. Now the unfortunate part is it's a full tank replacement, which I was told is $3,400 parts and labor. And that has been confirmed actually by the dealer. Now, that's where I get a little ornery about this, because that part we had done under the warranty, the BMW warranty, at about 165,000 or about 160,000 kilometers. The vehicle has 220 on it. The vehicle has about 220,000 on it right now. So we only have about 60,000 kilometers since they put on that new tank. That was under the BMW extended warranty. Now I know they have their policies and they have their protocols, and they can't make all kinds of exceptions for every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has a car and has a problem. But I was actually directed, and I went to BMW Canada and I started chasing this up the flagpole. So we're gonna see what that ends up resulting in. I don't know yet, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them. My argument was, look, if you guys don't have the foundation, or you can't support the quality of parts that you're putting in your vehicles, where's the credibility? And where's the liability? And where's the accountability? It's all very, very bad. It's gray to me, and honestly, I spent about an hour on the phone with BMW Canada, a manager there. I just grilled them. I said, look, I'm not chasing here for a brake job. I'm not chasing for a new starter or the coil or the rear airbags that I had to do numerous times. I'm also not chasing the heater fan. I'm not chasing repairs. I'm here because this is a defunct part, in my opinion, and I think BMW needs to recognize that and be good to and stand by their product. And I really need to look at this in another light, because I really feel like we're getting ripped off here royally. So anyway, I talked to them. We're going to stand by and wait to see what happens there. The car's still at the dealer, and I've left it there for obvious reasons. So anyway, enough about that. Let's get into the Jag. Let's take it for a short drive. I'll talk about some of the things that I definitely wouldn't change, but then I really, like I said, want to dial into some of the things I would change. So let's go for a short drive. All right. There we are. So driving along, I want to mention that there's some things I wouldn't want them to touch for a second before I get into the things that I would change a little bit. But the exhaust system is something I wouldn't change. Now, I had a viewer last week reach in and commented on some things that he didn't particularly care for with the F Type, and there was enough of those little issues that it sounds like this particular viewer may have traded their car off or sold it because it became a little bit more than they'd kind of bargained for. A lot of the things he brought up, I would definitely agree with. The one thing that I think that's one of the party tricks is the exhaust sound. Now, it was very, very loud and almost like childlike, but I love that. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you're 17, 37, 57, or even 75. I know we've got older folks that are driving these cars, and I think we all appreciate the fact that you can turn that on. Now, the beauty with this is you can turn it off. So maybe you get tired of all that bumbling and banging around, but listen. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Oh. It's that very exhaust noise that just keeps a person dialed in and loves. That's one of the things I love about the car. We talked about that. There's no shocker. Everybody knows these cars make some of the best stock sounds in the industry. Yeah, it's in there with you know, a straight piped Camaro or a Mustang, but that's okay. You know, again, you can turn it off. That's the beauty in this. You don't have to live with that, and that's sort of the Jekyll and Hyde part. So that's something I personally wouldn't change. The fact that it's got dynamic mode allows you to turn it on or off. I love that, and I think that in itself is a big selling feature. And I suspect if it wasn't switchable, you'd probably have less people buying this car because a lot of the clientele tends to be more mature buyers. You know, clearly I'm not a young pup myself, but there's definitely people younger and older than me driving these F Types, and they drive them for the same reasons that I do. It's the dynamics, it's the excitement, but then again, you can turn it off at the drop of a hat and it's not an issue. So the other thing that I have to say is the handling. Now, we're just on street here, so it doesn't really matter. Most people drive these cars on the street, but for the odd time you want a spirited back road drive, it'll definitely accommodate that. If you ever decide to take it to the track, which I wouldn't say, it's not a track monster, although it does very well. I mean, look at Chris Harris, he definitely proves the worth of an F Type R on a track. But because it's not a dry sump engine, I wouldn't suspect long extended hard track drives would be particularly good for the car. However, if you want short track sessions or you know, maybe a half day at the track, the car can definitely accommodate. The handling is very benign. In other words, it's neutral. For an all-wheel drive vehicle, it handles very, very well. You don't get a lot of understeer, and quite frankly, it shifts directions very, very quickly. So handling is great. It's on a knife's edge. It accelerates quick out of the hole. And so from a driving dynamic perspective, there's very little to want in this car. It's absolutely amazing. And one more little blast. So enough of that little fun and frivolity. Let's pull over. I want to talk about one external component, and then we'll get into the whole idea of why I started talking about this and some of the things that I believe Jaguar should have done differently. And if I were one of the senior members at Jaguar, I would have done. You can't deny the style. I don't think you can really improve a whole lot on that. From an external styling perspective, sure, there's little things you can probably tune and tweak, but I think Ian Callum smoked this one out of the park. But so what could you possibly change if the car is so perfect as I've already been describing? What could you possibly change? So from a styling perspective or external styling, is there anything I would change? Like I've said before, I've had to put wheel spacers on the back to bring the wheels out. And you'll find, if you look at a lot of these cars out in the showroom floor, or if you find them sometimes, you see them out on the lots, you'll sometimes notice that the wheels, I think, are just a little bit too far inset. Such a minor detail, but that's really not the real big issue with these cars, because you can really easily adjust that. That's easily done by you and I. Let's talk about some of the bigger things that Jaguar should have actually done that make it difficult for you and I to change. So now we're in this beautiful cabin, just that smell of beautiful leather and everything else. It's just a beautiful place. It makes you feel nice and cozy and relaxed. But there are a few things on the interior of the car that I would probably change, again, if I was working at Jaguar. And let's speak to some of those. And this also speaks to the particular viewer that commented there last week. And I would say the interior quality. Now, I've said this before, and I've defended Jaguar, because I know there's a lot of people out there and reviewers that comment that the interior quality isn't all that good. I mean, people say, well, there's too much plastic and it's not of high quality. And I would argue that for the most part, the quality is actually really nice. I mean, look at the bolstering on the seats. You've got nice, embossed logos there. Nice details on the seats like that. You've even got detail like stitching on the tops of the door rails. You've got nice quality touches like that with some chrome and brushed aluminum finishing here. And even the dashboard looks very, very nicely done. Lots of vast space. But, they finish it off with nice stitching there, single row stitching. Nice little touch right there as in the button. And everything works nice. The quality feel is really nice. You press that, it drops. It's really slick. And you even get this nice double row stitching along here that follows all the way around. And you'll see that touches and accents everywhere. Steering wheel feels very nice. You've got this nice brushed aluminum. The buttons feel of reasonable quality, not the highest per se. I wouldn't say they're up quite there with some of the best, but they're all right. And it's this high gloss black. It's those accents that, as mentioned before, that are nice. Those are beautiful accent pieces, and certainly those are details that I wouldn't change. What I would change, however, is this. And people have commented, I'm not sure what this texturing is, and while it's not bad, it's not plain. And you'll notice the same thing here, is that lesser brands, like even BMW, and I'll say it, lesser brands, for example, even a 5 Series BMW, or you get into an M3 or M4 back in the day for about 100 grand, so quite a bit less change, and you get a car with potentially extra add-on, extra finishing. And I'll give you some examples. Could you imagine if Jaguar finished this nicely with a leather touch and then finished it off here with a nice carbon fiber handle? And possibly this plate that circles around here. Could you imagine if that was all carbon fiber? Maybe a nice carbon fiber accent up here. Even just odds and sods, door handles, and some of those pieces in carbon would be all it takes to really step it up to another level. As well, Alcantara is a nice touch. Now, I think when car manufacturers go all Alcantara, I think it really does start to look cheap. It's almost too racy looking, but touches of Alcantara. I mean, a lot of cars, even this material, not bad. It's a reasonable quality. It doesn't feel cheap, but could you imagine if this is all Alcantara up here as well? And even, like I said, a few touches of carbon fiber would be nice. Even this, if they segregated, right in here you have this flowing piece that comes all the way down, which it flows, it's nice. But if that was finished in a nicer material, something that was maybe a little bit, possibly carbon, or even if they sort of differentiated, in my opinion, the way they had finished this up, they could have cleaned this up a little bit. So now I'm just getting picky, but all I'm saying is you can buy an M2 competition back when it came out back in, say, 2019, or you get in an M3 or M4 for about just over 100 grand Canadian, and those cars had potentially a lot of carbon fiber in there, some pretty high quality finishing. Now, with that said, BMW, they put it in the places that you can see it, but we all know that I think they cut costs, in my opinion, under the hood where it matters. The excessive use of plastic means that car starts to fail before it should. Anyway, we won't talk about that today. Now, another thing is this. Now, what do we have here is an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission. Yes, you can shift it over. You can put it into a sport mode. You can manually shift. You've got the paddle shifters here on the steering wheel, and they work very nice. And I'll be honest, for an automatic transmission with a torque converter, there's no better. This is truly one of the best performing torque converter transmissions autos out there on the market, bar none. I haven't driven one that's more intuitive, that's as quick shifting, that feels as delightful as this car does. The transmission, you can't fault it. You really, really can't fault it. And it probably does the best job of bridging that sporty, accelerated, quick shifting feel that you get from a dual clutch with the drivability. You don't get that jerkiness on a start like a lot of the double clutch transmissions you get in, say, get behind the wheel of an early Nissan GTR, for example, and you'll quickly learn what an early style double clutch can actually feel like, and it's pretty rough and it's jerky. But a lot of people like that. I personally like that. I like that sporty or more aggressive feel. So personally, even to go back even further another step, I really do believe with the viewer that commented that it's okay to have this, because this addresses a lot of demographics that don't necessarily want to use a third pedal over here. They just like, you know, stop, go, and they don't want that third pedal over here to have to shift and have to use a manual gearbox. But in my opinion, it should have been an option. And the F Type R like we have here should have been an option. Now, I know you can get a manual gearbox associated with some of the V6 cars, but could you imagine if it was an option? And I know they probably wouldn't sell a lot, but they're probably tooled already for it. There's clearly a manual gearbox. It clearly fits within the chassis. So in my opinion, it should have been a feature, should have been an option. You know, check the box, and maybe it takes you an extra 3 weeks to get that on an order from brand new. But I really do believe for those really hardcore diehards like myself, I really would prefer a manual transmission in this car. Now, again, the ZF automatic that you see here is as good as it gets. So I don't feel like I'm necessarily sacrificing a lot, but to me, that's the little things. At least provide the option. I mean, sadly, every manufacturer is going this way now. Even BMW, they've turfed the double clutches and the manuals in a lot of their cars. Even the base 3 Series, 4 Series cars, now you're having to get just strictly an automatic transmission, at least in North America. I know the industry's going that way, and electrification's even worse, but truly would have been great to be able to get this in a manual transmission. Now let's turn on the ignition one more time, and I'll talk about the next thing that I would have personally changed. And again, I know it's an industry thing. It's not unique to the F Type, but I know there still are some brands out there that do utilize, and here I'll show you. So I'm going to turn on the ignition. And now I'm going to look right there. You'll see it's doing this little magic. So you click on the menu button right there. Then it takes you up to the menu. And of course, you can do all these fancy little things. You have this little menu right there. Click on there, trip, and so you can scroll through this, right? So then you have all these different menus like this. And then you can go, for example, vehicle info, right? And then you'll go down here. This is what I'm not loving. Vehicle oil level. So you click into that. And then it tells you, look, as you can see, sure, you've got the oil level. Looks like mine's full, so we're good to go. And this is good. It's simple. It's clean. And there will be times that it's just super convenient, and a lot of people enjoy that feature. I mean, I know the clientele, particularly who drive Jags, don't like to do a lot of, you know, the first buyers of these cars, obviously typically second, third, fourth generations, owners of these vehicles will tend to do a little more DIY. You sort of have to be able to stay alive with maintenance on these vehicles. But honestly, the dipstick is a dying breed. The dipstick isn't good just for checking your level, but you can check it whether it's hot or cold. You can check it on the fly. You pull up to a gas station, you can do a real quick check. You don't have to wait. And the other thing is you can give it a smell. Sometimes that gives away too much fuel. Maybe there's coolant on there, God forbid. Hopefully there's no problems like that. But truly, there's nothing under the hood by popping the hood that you can find a dipstick, and there should be. And it's not even about how much work you want to do. Sometimes you just want to validate. What if you're not 100% sure about the accuracy of your gauge? Or maybe you're changing the oil. So unless you've really monitored or you've done your research, you know exactly how much oil to put in, you could either under or overfill it potentially. If you're more of a rookie like me and you haven't had a lot of experience doing an oil change on your F-Type, it's a bit of a hit and miss. And BMW's got this similar process, protocols, so does Porsche, so does a lot of other brands. But it's a technology that I wish, personally, I would have doubled down. I would have provided both opportunities. As a matter of fact, you know, the X5 I spoke of, our E70 X5 actually has both provisions. You have the dash mounted, so for those quick checks and you don't want to get your hands dirty, it's great. But it also has a dipstick under the hood that I can validate that, and I can check it whenever I'm doing an oil service. It's just easy to double check your work. Now I want to address that comment. Now I also want to address the comment that the viewer stated that about reliability and the concerns or the lack of confidence in the reliability for long term, particularly when it comes to low production numbers, you know, quality control with these Jags, and the fact that, you know, when they become a little older, there's a concern that they can start costing you a lot of money. And I would say that's not too far from the truth, but I want to address that topic because this is an absolute beast. These cars are magnificent. And yes, there's issues for maintenance on these vehicles other than just doing oil services and coolant reservoir issues where sometimes these are known to leak, and there's fittings over there that sometimes leak and crack and split. But I mean, BMW owners, I think you're all familiar with cracking coolant fittings and leaks. So coolant leaks aren't necessarily new to the industry. It goes part and parcel to almost any vehicle, and especially a lot of modern day luxury cars. They all use similar types of fittings. I mean, I look at this and I think this is very much like a BMW part. It doesn't say BMW on it, but I look at a lot of these parts and the way the fittings are put together, even like snap fittings, a lot of it is very much standardized across the industry. And so to say that, you know, the lacking confidence in the mechanicals behind this car is certainly not incorrect, but it's consistent with anything else, whether you're buying a Mercedes or a BMW. And honestly, even some of the other Japanese brands are starting to implement some of those other components that sometimes you wonder if longevity is going to be the game. Other than direct injected injectors failing, or you get the snorkel on the supercharger that fails sometimes, these cars are relatively reliable. Now with that said, there have been a few blown engines here and there. Mostly I'm hearing mostly on the V6 side of it, but either way, some of that could even be contributed to overzealous drivers, but there could be a quality control issue underlying there as well. So with time, we'll see. However, I'm not overly concerned with this versus say even owning a BMW. The quality, very similar in terms, in my opinion. Now Squeaks and Rattles, interior fit and finish, that's another potential issue, and the viewer was definitely referring to that. You know, a lot of these cars start to squeak around and make noises. Yeah, that'll probably happen. You'll probably notice even more of that with the convertible, and certainly with age, but it's a stiff ride, and with time, things start loosening up. Yes, there could be the odd squeak and rattle. My car's pretty tight yet, but we'll see. And the other one, another one's a little picky, a bit of a niggle. It has to do with the key fob. Now, we have a cover on this, but, you know, I'm talking to people that I know, they're buying late model Ford pickup trucks and Chevys, and they get remote start off the key fob. But with Jaguar, I got to pay that subscription fee for that actual app on my phone. Well, that's great if you want it, but what if you don't want that? Now you don't have a remote start capability for this car, and I'm not loving that. There's people that I know that are driving much, much lesser vehicles that have cost half the money of this, and they have factory key fob mounted remote start as well as an app for the manufacturer. So I think that Jaguar sort of skimped. I mean, this is not an inexpensive car, and I think it's all in the details, right? And so from a livability perspective, you know, I live in the Great White North like this. It's very, very cold here all the time, and it's lovely to have a remote start capability in your hand. And another one I just want to add on there, it sounds a little picky, again, because this car really is about the driving experience, so I don't want to sound like I'm whining, because really, these are such minor details, and I know some of the details were even changed with the new update, with the newer Jag here, with the newer F Type, but there's still a little bit of a detail that I just want to spread, and I just want to share that with you guys, for those of you who may be considering the car. But personally, I wouldn't let any of these little details that I just bitched about get in your way of buying this car, because I think the car on a dynamic driving level is second to nothing. Styling, it's impeccable. Durability and reliability is as good as any other luxury car out there today. And so I'll give you another one that I just don't want to bicker, because truly the car is amazing and probably one of the best for driving dynamic perspective, style. There's nothing else I would buy. I still, even with these little knick-knack paddywhack issues, I don't even want to get into the fact that I wouldn't buy this car again, because I absolutely would. I just want to point out some of the little things that if you're expecting certain things, that you might be disappointed in certain little areas. But again, the driving dynamics are second to none. But here's another one for you. And it's this little guy right here, and it has to do with your infotainment system. This looks like similar quality and graphics as I had in my TomTom back from 1998. Clearly, you know, this is old. It's old, it's antiquated, and honestly, it doesn't have nearly the graphics or detail or technology in here that you would hope for in a lot of cars. And I want to add to the fact that you guys have all seen my wife's Mercedes, and it's only a C-Class. When I say only, C-Class is clearly one of the lower end models, but she's got the 360 camera, and the graphics on here is absolutely beautiful and crisp, absolutely amazing. And her car is an 18, just like mine. They're both 18s, but you can see the clear difference between, say, even Mercedes and Jaguar with some of that technology. But again, I wouldn't trade it for in a heartbeat. This car is so much more exciting in a driving dynamic perspective that I wouldn't trade it for a second. I mean, those are little details. And technology is just, it is what it is. It's just electronics and gadgetry. But if that's a problem for you, you may have to step up to the latest version of the F Type, but then you're dealing with the different headlights, and if you've got to really love that, because that's its own little nuance. Engine-wise, pretty much the same. It's up 25 ponies. But if you're looking at the earlier generation cars, this is some of the things that you're going to have to deal with. And the only other thing about Jaguar is their reputation. Unfortunately, they can't fix that. They're working on it. The car brand's getting better. And honestly, from, you know, a first-person perspective, other than some of the things like I've told you about freezing window sills where you couldn't get the door open because the window's frozen shut, issues like that, you know, smaller details with, you know, I've had some leaks and whatnot too from windows, you know, I don't know, those rubbers around there sometimes get a little compressed and then they start to leak and you have to get the odd dribble down in there. And some people comment about squeaks and rattles, but I mean, again, you know, that's a low volume production issue. Other than that, those are a few little knickknacks that some people talk about. Honestly, none of which really matter in the big picture. You've really got to drive this car. You get behind the wheel and you'll know exactly why I bought it. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video, and be sure as well, if you're not a subscriber, please do. I love the fact that you guys all engage regularly. This is great, really refreshing, and truly I'm living the lifestyle, the exciting car lifestyle. This is what it's about, and it doesn't really cost you anything to hit the old subscribe button, so go ahead and do that. You're going to be sure to enjoy. Hope to see you guys next time. Catch you then. Bye-bye.